Hello and welcome to part 3 of our second week of Ethical Issues in Computing and Technology. This video is going to be about Chapter 5 in the Reynolds, Freedom of Expression or Speech, and it starts on page 181. These are our major issues about freedom of speech and expression on the internet. We get defamation, obscene speech, anonymity, hate speech, and pornography. But before we do that, we're going to take a step back and think about freedom of speech and expression in general. We know that we are protected, our right to free speech, in the First Amendment to the Constitution, which says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peacefully assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. But the freedom of speech is, of course, an older idea. We're going to think of one that comes to us from John Stuart Mill, one of the founders of utilitarianism and also an ardent advocate of free speech. And he argued for absolute free speech. Nothing should be censored. And he thought that this is the only way for individual people and communities to grow and improve in knowledge. So J.S. Mill, excuse me, okay, I don't know what's happening here. There we go. Advocated for total free speech. The only thing that can limit it is the harm principle. Meaning that everyone has total liberty until their actions harm someone else's individual liberty, including speech. Speech is an action. Excuse me. This is put colloquially sometimes as my right to punch ends at the tip of your nose. So what might constitute harm with speech? There are some things that we have outlawed. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's going to lead directly to people getting hurt. You can't say things known as quote-unquote fighting words, meaning you are inciting someone else to violence directly. We have laws against false advertising because small companies, comparatively to the whole population, have disproportionate power, and if they lie, they can harm a whole lot of people. Now, just as a brief interlude, the reason Mill thought we should have total free speech is he thought there were 3 different scenarios that could happen. The person with the bad or controversial opinion could be right. And if we ban them, we aren't going to figure out as quickly as we would if you could have free speech. Could be wrong. But we can't ban it because when we don't have real rigorous debate, we learn things by rote, by authority figure. So someone just tells us it's true, but not how or what the alternate viewpoints are, and we cease to become as good of critical thinkers as we can. Now, he doesn't think 1 or 2 happen all that often. They do, but most of the time, what we think of as the bad opinion or belief is a little bit right and a little bit wrong. And so are we on the majority side. And this is another reason that for progress, we need robust debate with as many viewpoints as we can possibly figure out. Now, people have debated this or brought up counter-arguments to the idea that, yes, we want the intellectual marketplace, but that doesn't mean we have to re-argue for basic human rights over and over and over again. Sort of like my right to punch ends at the tip of your nose. Maybe the right for tolerance ends at the tip of someone being completely intolerant. So there are ways to counter and counter these kinds of arguments. But we have these arguments for absolute freedom of speech. What might we want to protect using internet technology? There's always been all this stuff, but it has unique and particular challenges in the digital age. Defamation, again. Speech that is pretended to be true, actually false, and harms someone. If you say it orally, it is not libel. It's slander. If you say it written, then it's libel. And before the internet, we had magazines and we had newspapers, we had word of mouth, and those things really could harm someone. But now we can have a tweet go around the world and someone can lose their job. How do we protect billions of people every day who spew bile about others online that can actively end up tanking a business or stopping you from getting the job that you want? There have been some ways that people have tried. The Communications Decency Act, Child Online Protection Act, filtering. That moves on. Actually, those things are key issues. I'm not sure what they were going with there. We're going to just skip over that. And we're going to talk about obscene speech instead, which is going to come into play again when we get to the last category here, pornography. This case that is mentioned on page 183, Miller versus California, 1973, has been used so widely and is so well known that people still use it sort of as a marker today to decide whether or not something should be censored. And they say that there are 3 criteria for defining obscenity. Would the average person applying contemporary community standards find that the work taken as a whole appeals to prurient interest? And that is vice or sinful or morally bad interest, pleasures of only the senses with no quote-unquote redeemability. Does the work depict or describe in a patently offensive way sexual conduct specifically defined by the applicable state law? And finally, does the work as a whole lack serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value? If the answer is yes, then the speech is obscene. And this was in response to mailers that were sent out for adult material and magazines, unsolicited. So people got mad about it and they sued the company. There's problems here, as you might imagine. Who's the average adult? What are contemporary community standards? And what counts as a community? Where it might have been straightforward in the past that every community should decide for itself, every city, every town, every region. On the internet, who decides? Who's average? Is it the most conservative idea of what counts as obscene? The most liberal? Now, these aren't the political labels. Conservative means the strictest, whereas liberal in this sense means the loosest. We use those words in multiple different ways, so I just want to make sure I am unambiguous. Problem here is a lot of people use this obscene speech and defamatory language under the guise of anonymity. They do not reveal their real identities. And this can be a problem if you are actively harming other people. So there are what is known as John Doe lawsuits, in which you can file a claim, file a lawsuit, and ask the court to subpoena the records of the person and force them to show themselves. Now, people who are on the side of this say you shouldn't be able to use a platform like the internet to bully and harm someone in their lives and their opportunities. But on the other side, they say that this can easily be abused to force people who complain about their job or complain about the government and be punished for their free speech. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is an organization that's been around for a pretty long time trying to protect the little guy's rights online, won a case, I think at the Supreme Court, in which, it was a federal court, not the Supreme Court, that a subpoena to force someone to show their identity should only be enforced when the subpoena was issued in good faith, not for any improper purpose. It is related to the core claim or defense. This is page 193, by the way. The identifying information was directly and materially relevant to that claim or defense, and adequate information was unavailable from any other source. Okay. Our last two, hate speech and pornography. So hate speech, broad statements expressing hatred of an ethnic, racial, or religious group, not allowed. It can be prosecuted. It is very hard to prove that you hate someone and you are targeting them because of their membership within a group, not because you are targeting them specifically and individually. There's no involvement of the federal government, so there's no violation of First Amendment rights. And as of this publication, I did not update this one, there are no federal laws protecting people against hate speech. I've already mentioned some of the issues with pornography and computing technology. We get told on page 194, many people, including some free speech advocates, believe there's nothing illegal or wrong about purchasing adult pornographic material made for and by consenting adults. And the First Amendment protects this material. What about kids? And what about national community standards? Some of this stuff is quite a bit out of date, so I think we are going to end this section right here. The last video for you this week will be discussing the informal essay assignments. See you there.